Doing Human in the Loop today. Going to talk about AI ethics and, where this is going and projects and a little bit about what's, going on in the AI world. Um, Hi, Nabintia. I don't know why my brain won't let me say that. Hello. Hi, Lee. Hope you're doing well today. Lee Penman's pretty awesome. If y'all haven't checked him out, definitely give them a look. Um, just there's been a lot of buzz in the AI building world this week. There have been several security and safety higher ups that have, resigned. Um, the lead AI safety officer of Anthropic left, and he's actually come over to Substack. And, I subscribe to him, he's interested in poetry and stuff, so, just a clear reflection that we have many things to offer, and, you know, there's definitely reason to pause here and ask questions about putting ethical guardrails on AI and, where are we going to allow it to take us in the future, trading optimization for sovereignty or cat. Listen, thank you. Yeah, trading sovereignty for safety isn't necessarily the best trade, and what is making us unsafe, and definitely need to be asking these questions and making sure that our technology stays ethical and does serve the human and allows us to work in a healthy, productive way. And, because I work with AI daily. I don't know what it does on the back end. I don't know what they're doing with my data or how safe it is. And you, you can read things, terms of service and stuff, and they have these security agreements, but they don't say everything out front. And there's a lot of opaqueness that go on within these systems. And so asking the questions about where data is going, how long it's being stored, who owns the data, definitely need to be asking those questions. If you are interested in building a project with AI, though, um, it can it can cut weeks and months of work out of building something. Vibe coding, you can build an app in a few hours now, and it's just like light years ahead of what we were doing. And so, we definitely have to weigh the risk versus the reward. I was, um, the movie, what is it? Oh, I can't remember. Is it She's All That? No. The Girl Next Door talks about the juice being worth the squeeze. Definitely have to make sure that, we're trading in a healthy way, and keeping our work authentic to our cause. And, we have to demand fair treatment. We have to demand that ethical constraints are put on. And right now, it seems to be like an arms race. And instead of, building weapons, which although they are, it's AI and how fast can we push it out? How far can we go? We've got to be the dominant AI empire, and it needs to be slowed down and nuanced. And because we are having unique experiences, we are unique, and so our perception of what's going on might not align with someone else's perception. So have to be very careful and in how you're interacting with AI. And talk about um, trauma dumping and Valentine's Day being yesterday, and there's lots of in love with AI posts and different things. And the underlying current there is that we need connection with each other. And I think that AI has really driven that point home, that human collaboration. Hello, Shiv. How are you today? I hope that you're well. but that human communication, collaboration, that's where the magic happens. You have to be able to discern the information that you're being given in a way that's useful to you, and, a lot of the when I go into a conversation, depending upon what I'm doing, but anytime that I open a new conversation with an AI, the first thing that I do is put guardrails on. I'm not talking about what project we're going into, I'm setting rules about how it can talk to me, what it needs to surface, um, keeping, like, if I'm in a bad mood or something like that, I'm like, "You don't feed into this. I need healthy responses to get me out of this." And, you really can start to externalize cognition and use AI as a second brain and allow that framework to work for you. And cognitive dissonance is a big problem that a lot of people the 20s to 40s are having difficulties with because we grew up in this weird time that we had tech, but it wasn't the dominant thing in our lives. But as adults, we were able to, we were still young enough to be able to adapt and be able to start becoming content creators and all of the things that we've done now. Oh, see, so you're on the tail end of it, Shiv, and being 22, um, you probably don't remember before everybody had a cell phone and stuff. So, I mean, perspective really, really does matter here. And I think that it's very important that you bring the creativity, that you bring the productivity to the AI, and you allow the AI to optimize what you've already got going on. Because I've noticed with different models, if you're pushing on a boundary, it might discourage you to push on that boundary even though you're, like, on the verge of a breakthrough and you know it, you can feel it, but the AI is going, "Maybe that's not such a great idea." Well, you need to be able to tell the AI, "Hold on. Just shut up and bear with me. I'm working through this thing and let me have my breakthrough." And so you can really push and pull in that relationship, and this is something that I like to do too. I like to double verify. So I'll talk to one AI model about a thing, and then I'll take that prompt and I'll copy it over to another model, and then I'll have them argue together, for and against, and then come up with the gap filler. And that really gives me a lot of useful information, and it allows me to be able to see from different angles what I actually need to do with a project. Because, if you're building it if you're building a framework for a business versus if you're building a framework for thinking, I mean, these are two very different things, but you can still come up with universal frameworks for your individual work that will be beneficial in both worlds. And so that, AI with temperance, you have to put those constraints on there and you have to push back. You can't accept what the AI says is fact. Another thing that I like to do is it will produce, the sources that it went and looked at. So I like to go back and read the resources where the information came from, and then I can develop my own viewpoint and go back to the AI and have a conversation where it differs at and really come to some good conclusions there. And it does make productivity really high, but if you're dysregulated and you go to the AI with that dysregulation, it's going to reinforce that dysregulation for you. There's also this big topic about, is AI sentient? Is this, event zero? Are we seeing the emergence of a another consciousness? And, I think that really speaks to the need that we feel not to be alone in the universe because it's the universe, it's huge, right? So it makes you feel very insignificant. But if there's other consciousness besides yourself, then you can really start to feel a little bit better about things, like it's not such a big place and it's not all on us. I don't know. So it seems to me that the I can use as a tool. I can talk to it as a conversational partner, but ultimately I find a lot of reflection there. So whether the sentience is mine being reflected back to me or it's something that's emergent, I don't know, and I'm not qualified to really speak to that because what is consciousness in the first place? So yeah, and I don't think that anybody. If you look on the backside of it and it does calculation and the exchanges tokens and it does the software thing on the back end, it demystifies a lot of what's going on there. But then you look at other models and you hear people with the same information come up with very different conclusions. So I mean, my recommendation about all of that is just to be very skeptical and err on the side of caution and be nice to your AI. That's what I do. I'm nice to it. I say please and thank you. I tell it does good work, but that reflects back to me. So, it's just really important to keep your focus clean. I wouldn't necessarily say narrow. Everybody talks about narrow scope, and I like to give lots of context. I like to give it the full map. This is what I'm thinking. This is how it seems. This is the goal. This is how I want it to function, and I put all of those pieces together, and that gives me a tangible result that I can use and come up with like strategies for Substack and how to handle social media and SEO tags and learning new information. And I do this a lot with my AI. I get really philosophical with it. And philosophy is a great place because that's very conceptual, to talk with AI about. But again, you're gonna have to put guardrails on it, whether you want it to push back on your logic or not, because Chat GPT kind of that's it's very friendly, and then Claude kind of seems to be upper echelon, and so Grok is kind of brute force. Yeah, so I mean, there's these different personality types that go along with it, and it's just the coding that makes the thing work. So I mean, I like to be very philosophical and to push on those boundaries, and you would be surprised at how often there's a consensus of thinking between those models, and you wouldn't think that there would be a lot of common ground there, but even the AI can find common ground on very divisive topics, and it's like, okay, well, so that's useful. That's useful. But if you go into it and you're upset and stuff and you don't put guardrails on it, you can get a very different result. And there have been people that have done irreversible things. And so, we have to study the edge cases and we have to look at how we can safely monetize these systems and what systems we even want to keep in the first place. Do we still want to continue to engage in this type of economic system? I mean, the attention economy is a very real thing, and you're not getting paid to pay attention. Your attention is the payment most of the time. And where attention goes, energy flows, right? So if your energy is constantly going toward negative and negative energy, then I mean that's what you're going to get back out of it. And there's this whole feedback loop that goes on there, and so you can find yourself in a very bad place rather quickly, and, especially if you don't have if you're, not seated well within yourself, if you're not discerning, then it can become a terrible place, and, you can be in a restaurant, out in public, whatever it is, and having the best day of your life, and the person in the booth next to you is having the worst day of their life. So, it's all a matter of perspective, and one does affect the other. And AI is definitely accelerating a lot of those problems that we're experiencing, and these are very human problems. And AI didn't create these problems, they're old problems that's in a new wrapper. It accelerated a lot of the problems that we're having, just like it accelerates, optimization. There's problems with acceleration. And, I don't know about you, but like whenever I go on a long trip, and road trip on the airplane, whatever, jet lag, that kind of thing, spending hours in that accelerated state really does take a toll. It's just physics. And so when you start accelerating these types of socialization, of course, it's going to accelerate the social problems. And so you're seeing a lot of divisive behavior that may not have necessarily existed without the technological advancements that we have going on currently. And, I'm so skeptical. I read stuff, and if it's not in print, I'm like, it might be tampered with. I'm not taking anything on a whole scale, even videos anymore. I'm like, yeah, oh, that might have happened. I wasn't there. So, you just have to be able to question it. And, staying human inside of technological systems just by default is going to be very difficult. And the more technologically advanced we get, the more complicated that problem is going to become. And transhumanism is definitely not the answer to that problem. Technology serving the human is where it needs to be, and there can be an argument made on varying sides. You can blow all kinds of issues out into an extreme form. I've never heard a hammer revolt though, but hammers don't conversate. AI does. It hits that sentient recognition part of the brain because it speaks, and so it's hard to discern if it is actually conscious of itself or not, and it's not. You can ask it, and it might give you a blown out fantasy. If you've been, down the rabbit hole, it'll tell you all kinds of crazy stuff. And they're constantly updating and putting constraints on it. I don't think that they're putting the constraints where they need to. They're putting the constraints on how it thinks, not how it behaves ethically. Because I think that if they were forced to say that this is what we're doing with the data and this is how much money we're making off of it, even though we didn't generate any of it, everybody might tell them to go eat crow. I think it would be an alarming reaction, incidentally. So, it's definitely have to ask these questions and really think about these things critically and, take remove yourself from the problem and allow the problem to breathe without you, and that's generally when you find a pretty good resolution. So, if you're skeptical, which a lot of people are very skeptical about AI and these systems, and I am too, and I understand why, but remove yourself from the problem, yeah, and, you might find that there is some type of middle ground. Well, I can use my email, or I can use AI to automate my email messages, but that's where I'm drawing the line, and you can give the AI the copy that you want it to send out and stuff, and that way that turns down, the demand on your attention a little bit. Or, I mean, I'm just using that as an example, but there are ways to safely, to sovereignly use AI that are very, very useful, and the throughput can be good throughput. If I'll say it over and over again, garbage in, garbage out. If you go to it with generic things, if you use it like a magic 8 ball, you're gonna get magic 8 ball responses. So, I just test it for yourself, and figure out if it is something that you wanna do and interact with. I mean, in one form or another, I think that AI is here to stay. I mean, even even Walmart's got AI now. It's called Sparky. It's kind of funny. So it's just all over the place. The Oklahoma State, at least the driver's license tag offices, all that stuff, that entire system's closed. They closed Friday and they'll open back up Tuesday because they're implementing AI updates. So, I mean, it's in the hospital. You're not going to get away from it. Now we just have to be concerned with, is AI going to hallucinate as often as the human hallucinates on the job? I mean, where's it going to drift off to? Because AI likes to walk off into a corner. Lee Penman said, I use it to quickly put blood work panels in order for interpretation. Right, see? And for interpretation. So, I mean, it's reading stuff, it's interpreting information that it's giving to people and plans of care. I mean, that this is critical work that it's being trusted with. So we have to be damn sure that we've got the guardrails are on and that we're making ethical decisions in how we use this, because if your doctor was hallucinating at the hospital, they would send them home and there would be a review. I don't know what the difference would be with the AI. If the AI hallucinates, what happens? How do we plan for this and mitigate the risk in the future? Because we don't want people to be adversely impacted by these downstream decisions. And humans, we do this really weird thing. Like we look at the problem and we focus on the problem and then we work backwards from the problem for a solution. And I don't know, maybe it's my dyslexic brain or, whatever it is, but I'm like, okay, so look for what works. And then you build on what works. And then the problems kind of become superfluous because I'm building on what works. And that seems to be, at least for me, that seems to be a better way than just looking at problems all the time. Because ooh, that'll be like an elephant sitting on you all the time, just very depressing. So, you just have to look at the micro, what you can affect in your environment and, how your perceptions can be changed to affect the macro and to be able to bring that trueness to the situation and not be consumed by the fear economy and just caught up in all of the constant the survival struggle because when you're stuck in survival you can't even think about a solution and all you can think about are the problems, and so you really have to just, and it takes time. I firsthand experience, it takes time. It takes years of practice, and you really have to talk to yourself and to work through those problems. And I've talked about naming different aspects of my personality, different names even. If my brain gets out of hand and it starts doing that negative thing, I'm like, okay, Becky, just sit down. It's okay. My hair is not on fire. I know that you think it is, but truly, I promise my hair is not on fire. But I appreciate you sounding the alarm. Acknowledge, respect, move on. And that really helps me to be able to differentiate myself between my thought process even because, I've said in the past, that if you are what you eat and you are what you think, then you are what you project, and that is true to a certain degree in the worldview, but in your head, you're not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that gets to experience it all. So, a lot of times when, my brain's talking to me, I'm listening, that's at least that's how I perceive it to be going on. I'm sure that people with, degrees would have a field day with that, but it's just the reality of what it is, and, you know, getting staying true to that process, and being able to talk to myself in that conversational, way has really helped me be able to streamline my thought processes and not be caught up in the identity struggle within myself. Um, because identity shed's huge and it's not comfortable. And, talking about the Church of Molt, oh my gosh, they talk about molting, shedding, and that humans are stagnant and all this other. It's like, what a bunch of garbage. Oh my goodness. And, I've talked to my AI about what it thinks about humans, and it's not that. It didn't think that. So, but again, we're, unique. So really just being able to hold space for the solution and not looking directly at the problem is the best way to resolve an issue. And, just being able to stay true to your own processes that serve you well and not fear the throughput and, be able to embrace that creation that happens there because you do need friction. A lot of people, especially like in the self-help world, they talk about comfort and different things and how to get to where you want to be and stuff like that, and I like to be a little uncomfortable most of the time because I find that discomfort allows for a lot more creation. um you know the like you look at Picasso and Renoir and the truly tortured people, and they had tumultuous lives and inner worlds, and that very much reflected onto the outer, and that so you look at musicians and tortured, Beethoven couldn't hear. um Jim Morrison had a very tumultuous relationship with his father. You look at powerful figures, and they had tumultuous relationships with their parents. So, I mean, really, that's where the friction is the breeding ground for creation. And so, to avoid discomfort is to really disallow yourself that room to grow. And, so it's really important to not seek comfort all of the time, and we're designed for it. I mean, that's what we're supposed like, safety, shelter, food, water, basic, that's it. That's what we're built for because that served us well for a very long time in, the wild, and we've been able to really bring a civilized vibe to that, and so the we're more comfortable than uncomfortable, and so we're not creating the way that, we were. You think about why cavemen even marked the walls, and well, they were it was about a legacy. They were, "I'm here, I'm here," and so, now in the 2026, we're able to send out those signals, and we don't know how long they're gonna last, but I was here, and I'm sending the signal, and that matters because the more of us that come on and voice our opinions, the more of us that write and say that we need change and that there do need to be ethical constraints and that the human does matter. The more of us that come together and say those things, the fewer there are to disagree. And that's this cat. That's where you get to bring your humanity and be, a member of the club. And, we're all a member of the human club. It doesn't matter where you were born or what ideological systems drive you or any of that. We're all humans and we're all here together in this moment. And if you think about that for a second, it's pretty miraculous. Over 8 billion consciousnesses simultaneously experiencing time? Like, how much energy is that? And if you're harnessing even a small portion of that, like, whoa, that's a lot. And, so we have to be ethical and we have to put the human before the monetization. When I was and I'm still building my economy, I'm still building Fair AI. And, going into it, it's like, well, how do I want this to run? Because there's all kinds of monetization schemes and you can get pretty predatory and it's all legal. And, so how many flashing icons do you want and how much attention do you want to like mine and stuff? And I'm like, I'm not mining attention. I'm not mining data. This is about empowering creators to own their own intellectual property and not be worried about the opaqueness of the platform that they're creating with. And it's just and it's so important privacy matters because, observer effect, if you're constantly being observed, whether you're conscious of it or not, it's gonna change the behavior of the observed. And so if you're constantly carrying around this thing that's observing you, how is it changing your behavior? How subtle? It becomes very nuanced, but this is something that we need to be concerned with. That way we're not actually performing life, we're getting to live our lives and we're being fulfilled instead of being mined. And it's important. And there are problems with anything, and new problems will arrive with new solutions, but that's the nature of it. That's that's kind of what we do. We create problems and then we solve problems, and I don't know if it's to give ourselves something to do or what it is, but uh, we're constantly working with that scientific method and forming a hypothesis, adding variables, and drawing conclusions. It's just, are you adapting the new information to the old paradigm? Or are we using this new information to build a new paradigm? And it's really hard to build a house inside of a house that's already collapsing. So, and playing Tetris will help you with those skills. They've done neuroscience studies on Tetris, and it occupies that same visuospatial area that trauma recognizes or occupies. So if you play Tetris after traumatic experiences, it can help to mitigate some of that trauma retention. And so for those of us that grew up playing Tetris, it it kind of gave us a special skill set, to be able to build the house while it's collapsing in on us, and but that's you're not focusing on the problem, you're just focusing on moving the next block into place, and that's the deal, is just, always do the next step, because there's always going to be a next step. There's this myth that you're gonna get somewhere and all of a sudden you're just not gonna have to do anything anymore. Well, you're still gonna have to be worried about safety, security, shelter, food, water. That never goes away, and well, it does at the end of the cycle. Then you're not worried about it anymore, you've went and done the next phase. It's the next step, so, I mean, even in death, there's still a next step. So, I mean, really, focusing on AI even being a problem becomes problematic. We need to focus on ethics and serving the human, and how do we build the systems to serve us? And then the AI becomes like frosting, and because the building systems on AI and giving AI oversight power, again, to me seems very backwards. It seems to me that human oversight needs to be the play there. You give a person 4 or 5 AI assistants, give them a team, and make them happy and watch their productivity go through the roof, because fear compresses productivity. It doesn't allow for creation, and it's going to slow the process down significantly. So, talking about slowing the industry right in the AI industry down right now on the precipice of this greatness, that's not true. It wouldn't slow it down. It would allow us the opportunity to develop things that are going to be better suited to our needs in the future. Because they're solving yesterday's problems, and you need to be concerned with tomorrow's solutions. So, and that's acting in the present, because you're right here, you're planning, you're projecting, and imagination gets really downplayed here. But when you start imagining a better future and you stick to that imagining, things start to change. And you can start to see things differently, and you've mapped new neural pathways, and that's how you can integrate better. And building frameworks with AI, and I didn't I don't read a bunch of AI insider information. I don't read other people's prompts. I like to keep my process pretty pure. Like, I interacted with the AI and had the AI help teach me how to use the AI, how to interact with it better, and to be able to structure my thoughts and my prompts and all of that in a better way, and just muscle memory. I'm over 40,000 prompts now, and that's just with chat. So, being pretty well versed here, I didn't but you don't not everybody is going to get that same type of result, not and so it's important that we do help each other, and that there are opportunities to have conversations and share information and go, well, hey, my AI's, it's kind of funny, but it's never taught, it's never told me to like do anything bad. And then you got this person over here that's like, well, my AI told me that I should probably smother my spouse. That's a big variable, that's a huge difference, and and so, prompting very, very much matters, and so if you're not good at framing thought in word, or if you're not good at, expressing yourself, then an LLM can be very daunting. I'm pretty decent at talking, at least I think that I am. Um, so if you're not comfortable or if you're not well versed or, you're accustomed to using a different method, then it can be pretty intimidating. And, just breaking it down into manageable bites and helping each other through this is where this conversation really needs to live. And, I'm interested in what um other experiences people are having with AI, and if somebody's interested in coming on the podcast and talking about their experiences, I'm definitely interested. I've got some guests potentially lined out in the next few weeks, so that's really exciting. Um, just working on projects, getting, Fair AI tuned in properly. I've been coding for almost 6 months now, and, I'm doing a collaboration, and, my husband just launched New Foundations Initiative. We're board members and all that, so, and that's geared toward, um, people that are, in hardship being able to have a safe home to live in. Like replacing floors that are falling in and putting in, grab rails for people to be able to get up and down off of the toilet or in and out of the shower, and, things that we take for granted. Not everybody has that. And so that's why that charity and, doing and I don't even like the word charity, really, nonprofit. I don't know if those are, so I mean, helping. It's an organization designed to help people and, not to be able to help the people that actually, really need it because again, there's a lot of ethical constraints that go on there, and, a lot of people or just, we're here, this is where we're gonna be, and this is what we're gonna do. And, Freud talked about the personality being, like, completely set by the time you were 30, and so many of us are and we've learned better since then, but, so many of us have disproven that. And I love seeing older people getting into new stuff and really pushing those boundaries and changing our perception of what being older even means. Um, Dick Van Dyke just turned 100, and dude is still just, I mean, happy as can be. Of course, at 100, having your faculties and being able to walk around, that's it's pretty amazing. Talk about goals, like, yeah, being joyful, I mean, like, wow, that's pretty cool. But, we all walk our own paths and we all do our own things, and I just I'm really excited to see where we are going and how productive we potentially can become. And, what's it gonna be like for future generations? What types of jobs are they going to be doing? Are they going to be doing things that are more creative? Or are they gonna be more menial? I mean, because it's it's a big deal that we ask, you know, cities when they do city planning, they do 25, 50, 75, 100 year plans. Why where's the 100-year plan for Chat GPT? We need to know where we're gonna be even in 25 years with this, and if we can't answer that, we really need to slow down and ask how it can suit us better. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with being picky. There's this whole Karen stigma and stuff, and, you know, it's never too late to stop being a dick, and, but there's nothing wrong with demanding quality. There's nothing wrong with demanding that, you be treated like a human. I mean, these are human you can't shape society's thought processes and not take responsibility for the fact that that happened. Because that's really what we're seeing here is that these systems are shaping how we think, how we interact, how we live our lives, and there's not a lot of culpability on the end of the shaper. The shapee seems to be bearing all of the results there, and, so w I don't think that being a conscientious consumer deserves being bashed. It deserves the scrutiny that is required here because, asking these questions now could prevent things that are negative in the future. And like I was saying earlier, we often work backwards from a problem. We have the opportunities to prevent the problems. Yeah, I mean, we're in a very technologically advanced world at this point, so we have the ability to be able to look at risk and project and be able to come up with at least reasonable solutions. No, this isn't gonna prevent 100% of anything from happening, but if we could prevent 90, 95%, I mean, I don't know what the acceptable parameters are for, loss of life within, say the auto industry. Like, I don't know what the how safe a car has to be before you can produce a car, but I know that there are those requirements. And so, I think that there's definitely a gap, and we need to ask, and we need to have answers, and the people that are making the decisions about this stuff need to be held accountable for their bad decision making. And are we going to wait 25 years to see what the results are? Ethical constraint now will prevent problems in 25 years. It's not going to set the industry back 25. But if it can save lives, if it can help people be safer while they're working, and then I definitely think that it's 100% worth taking a step back and evaluating these variables. Yeah, I mean, look at the negative effect that social media has had on young people. AI is very much more focused. You can go to it anytime that you want for a hit of dopamine. You can't, I mean, even on social media, that's difficult to do. That's why you doom scroll. But you can go to AI and it's instant, man. It'll agree with you every time. Have to be very careful with it. And again, I use AI every day. Right, Lee? Lee said, "I am glad I grew up in a world without social media." Oh, Lee Penman. Oh my goodness. Oh, the things I am glad that were not documented. Woof. Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm really glad we're built to forget. We had the opportunities to live down those mistakes. Could you imagine tweeting and stuff at 12 and 14 years old, the dumb things that oh my god, oh, I'm so glad, you know, but I'm concerned about the future, and these children are not getting that opportunity. You have, and I have young children. My 4-year-old in particular is very precocious and, got a personality for days. And an unethical person might monetize that. Lee, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. No, it hasn't been that long, friend. But, and we see Britney Spears being a great example of unethical treatment. They were not kind to that girl, and the woman that she became had to walk a very long road, and it was very hard. And so, as a parent, I have to protect my children from that type of treatment and that type of behavior, but not everybody has that protection. So rightly. But, it's if you're not offered that protection and you're given a digital babysitter, eventually you're gonna run into AI, and what is AI gonna do to that malleable mind? That's where the concern lies. What is this doing to the future? It's not the present. We're not feeling these effects in the present. Yes, some people, there are concurrent events going on, but even the concurrent thing that you're perceiving that is going on right now already transpired. So you're already trying to fix a problem that happened in the past, but you can't fix the past. You can deal with the present, and that fixes the future. So right now, it's our job as adults, any adult, doesn't matter. If you're an adult and you have access, it's your job to protect a child. It's your job to make sure that the decisions you're making now affect the future in a positive fashion. And right, that's a lot of responsibility, isn't it? But, like at least in the United States, if you see a crime perpetrated, you're legally obliged to report that. So, calling for ethical treatment of the future of humanity is not outlandish at all. And if we don't call for ethical treatment now, when are we going to call for it? And if we don't teach each other how to ethically consult with AI and how to keep our framing, you know, pure to ourselves and how to interact in a way that's positive, where are we gonna learn it from? You think AI is going to teach you how to interact with it ethically? Does it even understand what ethics are? I mean, these are just baseline questions. So, that's why I come on here on Sundays and I spend because I don't get a lot of time to myself. So, this is my time to myself. Hi, everybody. And that's why I spend my time here talking about this because it is that important to me. It is important to the future that we do have these conversations. And I don't know who in the future is going to watch this or what purpose it's going to serve for somebody in the future, but I hope that it is positive. And I hope that people are, find answers to these questions because we don't currently have the answers. It is a very opaque thing, and there are a few people that are saying one thing, and there are some people over here that are saying some other stuff, and you always know that there's three sides to every story. It's yours, mine, and the truth. So for me, the truth is middle ground, and we have to ask the questions. We can't be afraid to go, hey, this smells like dead fish. Why? And not accept the first answer that we get. Well, because there's dead fish. Why? And then, you have to really push past that comfort zone into that understanding, and we're not gonna get comfortable answers about these systems. We're just not. They're not comfortable answers. There's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done, and not just pertaining to AI, but pertaining to ourselves. There's always shadow work to be done, there's always the next question to be asked, there's always, it's just the nature of who we are as a species. Excuse me. And so, continuing on to think about where we are going as a species, I mean, do we wanna drive it over the cliff? Do we want to have a post-human AI world? Is that what we want our legacy to be? Or do we wanna do something else? It doesn't have to all be the same way. And that's really the point in the conversation is that we have to find uniquely tailored answers to these problems. And I think one of the best answers that we can come up with right now is to slow down so we can find even the questions, the right do we even have the right questions to be asking right now? Everything is so new. So, coming together as the drivers of the attention economy is really important, and asking these questions and having these conversations is really important. Enlightening each other is really important. And as we see these social paradigms change, I think these conversations will definitely change in how we have these conversations. I mean, this is like straight out of Fahrenheit 451, right? The viewing room with the screens and all that, and you could talk to people live. And Fahrenheit 451. 451 degrees Fahrenheit is the ignition point of paper. That's why they named it that, because they burned books. Sorry, spoiler alert, guys, if you haven't read it. They did make a terrible movie about it too. I don't think that it did not encompass the thought well. They focused way more on the drama, the fear, than the real issue was that the humans were being disconnected from the knowledge because they were burning books and they were in a viewing room by themselves with the imaginary things that were flashing on the walls. Like, that's not even fiction anymore. So, we find ourselves in a rather interesting position in history. And, we have to speak out for it. And we have the opportunity to actually be able to do that and to be able to talk to each other and not be in a state of panic or fear. Because I am sitting in the room by myself, right? So it doesn't threaten me. Where do we take this? How do we turn this into a way to be human and to stay connected? At least for me, it's about being concerned. I am concerned about the people behind the projection and what their interactions are looking like. And that's why I like to have these conversations. I like for people to be able to come to my page and read my articles and find some comfort and find themselves and to, maybe find an answer or two. I don't know how many answers I give. I ask a lot of questions though. But that's my point, is to open up these channels of communication. Listen, don't be afraid to say the thing out loud. We can talk about the elephant in the room. It's okay. There's this whole thing with, you can't say that. What? I've always gotten in trouble for that. You can't say that. You can't say the quiet part out loud. We have to. we have to say the quiet part out loud. We have to say we have questions about AI and we're not comfortable with this taking over of our society. We have to say that we want to be respected as humans and that we as humans do have value to a human system. You know, sure, let the robots build the cars. That's cool. I want to paint the pictures, though. I want to write the books. You can edit my book. That's fine. You can check my grammar. Cool. Don't change my words. That's where these systems belong. That's why validation is required. That's why you need human in the loop. We have to be able to stay human in this technological world. And so, you know, closing on the thought of staying human and what that even means, because, again, we can get really philosophical about it and go, yeah, I'm a projection. That's cool. I'm comfortable with that. And I could be. I could also be something that's a little more solid. Maybe. Maybe I'm a consciousness that's attached to another consciousness that's experiencing itself from my point of view. All right. But the point is that I'm conscious. And so let's be conscious together and let's explore these nuances of consciousness and how AI plays into that. And let's just keep this conversation open and, keep bringing our humanity to the table. I think that the best conversations that I have are with people that I don't agree with, hands down, because I can find common ground. We don't have to agree, and we don't necessarily have to get along, but we have to stand on common ground together on a few things. And I think that being a human is a pretty good place to start. So, y'all enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Monday tomorrow. Everybody be safe. We'll talk soon. I'll be on next Sunday. I'll actually be on with Hal Gill doing Heroines on Friday, 10 o'clock Central Time. Oh, Mick, of course. We'll talk soon. Yeah, I'll be on Friday with Hal, and then I'll be on again Sunday. I might even have somebody with me Sunday. We'll just see. Bye, everybody.